Factsverse presents. Soon after King Tut's tomb was unsealed, a weird series of phenomena began to occur. Before we get into this creepy video, drop down to the comments and tell us, do you believe in curses? Also, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. King Tutankhamun, also known as King Tut. He was an Egyptian pharaoh who lived about 3,000 years ago. People have been hearing about King Tut for years, but nobody knew what happened to his remains. When an Englishman decided to dedicate his life to finding King Tut's tomb, he hoped to be the person to find it, so he scoured Egypt looking for it, and finally, in 1922, he made a history-changing discovery. Unfortunately, he didn't pay attention to any of the obvious warnings. History says that King Tut took the throne when he was only 10 years old in 1323 BC. He ruled for only 8 years. Unfortunately, he had to deal with many health issues during his life because his parents were brother and sister. He had genetic neck issues that made turning his head difficult. He also suffered from multiple cases of malaria, and he needed a cane to walk. His life was not as glamorous as many people might believe. When he was about 18 years old, King Tut passed away. He had no heirs to leave the throne to. He and his wife bore 2 stillborn daughters. The next in line for the throne was his Grand Vizier A, who married King Tut's widowed wife and took control of the kingdom. Sadly, the Tutankhamun family line had died. When King Tut passed away, he was placed in a tomb with all of his worldly belongings. The tomb was sealed off, and over thousands of years of sandstorms, King Tut's tomb vanished. For over 3,000 years, the tomb went unseen and untouched. This was until Howard Carter from England came along. He was a collector of Egyptian artifacts, and he knew that finding King Tut's tomb would complete his collection. Ever since Howard was young, he had a great interest in history. When he was only 17 years old, he left his home in England for his first expedition. The only thing he had with him at the time was the chisel that his grandmother had given him. Shortly after Howard arrived in Egypt, he crossed paths with a very wealthy man named George Herbert, who was known as the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, and this was where Howard's life changed, as well as King Tut's legacy. When the Earl met Howard, he saw right away how seriously he took his quest. He decided to fund Howard's search, and for 15 years the Earl kept funding the search, even though Howard kept coming up dry. Howard became desperate to find something. He needed results to keep getting funding, so he grid-mapped the entire Valley of the Kings. He planned to search every single grid. Finally, 30 years after he began his search, he came to the last square. When he began excavating a tomb that belonged to Ramses VI, he found a set of stairs that led beneath the earth. He couldn't believe it. Had he finally found King Tut's tomb? Howard dug until he came to a sealed door. He knew that he had found something amazing, so he sent the Earl a telegram to tell him to come at once. While waiting for the Earl to arrive, Howard started noticing a few warning signs. First, a messenger let Howard know that a cobra had gotten into his home and ate his canary. A canary is said to be a symbol of peace. Well, that scared Howard so much that he was ready to quit. Howard decided, though, that maybe he was being silly, so he didn't abandon his mission. 3 weeks later, the Earl and his daughter, Lady Evelyn, arrived. They met with Howard and his assistant, Arthur Callender, to discuss Howard's find. It was time to get into the tomb to find out if it did, in fact, belong to King Tut. Howard didn't want to wait for the proper protocol, so he smashed the door open. The tomb was divided into 4 different rooms, and each one was filled with ceremonial objects that were designed to guide Tut in the afterlife. They found gold, massive statues, and even a pharaoh's throne. On his face was an intricate death mask. There were also hieroglyphics painted on the wall designed to be a warning. It read, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." Howard ignored the warning. He wanted the jeweled amulets on the mummified body, but they were stuck in resin. Howard ordered that Tut be dismembered to retrieve the jewels. Soon after King Tut's tomb was unsealed, a weird series of phenomena began to occur. When the Earl was shaving, he nicked a mosquito bite on his face that happened to be in the same spot where King Tut had a scar. The cut got infected, poisoned his blood, and then killed him. Next, his dog was peacefully sleeping when he yelped and died instantly. Word got out about the curse, and people started flocking to Egypt. People still weren't taking it seriously, and when a tomb visitor became sick from an aggressive fever and died, it was determined that King Tut had been stricken with that same fever. An Egyptian noble, Prince Ali Kamal Fahmy Bey, was shot by his wife while visiting the tomb. Later, the British Governor-General of Sudan was assassinated. Anyone who entered the tomb ended up dead or sick. Was it King Tut causing these things to occur, or were they just crazy coincidences? Tell us your opinion in the comments below, and subscribe for more.